So we've got a number of speakers. Our first speaker tonight, well, the two things. First of all, would you please turn off your mobiles so that we don't have any unneeded interruptions. And the second thing, the order for tonight's discussion is that we're going to have a series of presentations, about 15 minutes, from each of our speakers, whom I'll introduce in turn. And at the end of that, there'll be ample time for questions, discussion. It's a very open discussion that we're hoping to have here tonight. This is a university, and so we want to, if you like, ask the hard questions, as well as explore some of the issues. That's what we're here to do, and I look forward to that discussion. Okay, our first speaker tonight is Associate Professor Jake Lynch. Jake has a very distinguished history as a BBC reporter and then presenter, and since then he's moved into academia. He's now Director of the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies at Sydney University, and Jake is also one of the major international scholars and researchers in the field of peace journalism. He's published extensively in that. In fact, I've myself just come back from Denmark, and I was speaking to a person there, a journalism educator, who's done her PhD on peace journalism, and I mentioned, you probably know Jake, and she said, absolutely. I know precisely what he's on about. So Jake's a very distinguished person in this field, both as a professional journalist and also as a scholar. So the first speaker, Associate Professor Jake Lynch.
Well, thanks, Chris, for that generous introduction, and thanks everybody for coming. And Chris has laid out a series of concerns, quite rightly, arising out of this situation. I think it would be reasonable to say that one or two more have arisen as well, and I'm going to be speaking about some of them, notably the responses of the authorities here to issues around people coming from Sri Lanka to seek asylum in Australia. I think Chris would have been entitled to feel a slight frisson of vicarious pride at the fact that the most challenging intervention in this debate, Kevin Rudd, came from a journalism student yesterday at Charles Sturt University, so that's one of the journalism academics among us. Really speaking, it feeds into what I think is a concerning general picture. It's a familiar story indeed, it pains me to say, but what's emerging, I fear, is that this current government, the Rudd government, the Rudd Labour government, has, even though it came into office freighted with relatively modest expectations from many of us, is turning out to be a disappointment. So even the most unambitious measures to curb the emission of greenhouse gases are now hostage in the Parliament to a bunch of self-confessed climate change deniers. The military intervention, racist and repressive military intervention in the Northern Territory continues unabated, and of course there has been a notable reluctance on the part of Kevin Rudd and his ministers to do anything substantive to stand up for principles of human rights and humanitarian protection in conflict. Now, that extends to the debate here over the asylum seekers, and the journalism student who challenged the Prime Minister was quite right that what we see here, unfortunately, is a vacuum of leadership. Now, what has been a common factor, I think, in governments by parties which have traditionally had the identity of being progressive or left-of-centre parties, has been their pursuit of a principle which was named under the Clinton administration in the United States as triangulation. And this was a word coined by a political advisor whom Bill Clinton took on to try to secure a second term in the White House by the name of Dick Morris. And what it means is that you take what you suppose to be the position on a particular issue on the left of politics and the position of the mainstream right of politics, and then you find a place in the middle, and that's the ground you seek to occupy. Now, we we see that pattern, unfortunately, now replicated by many supposedly social democratic or progressive parties. I would go so far as to say that it is a cancer in the kind of political system we have in Australia, and it infects the whole of the system and prevents it from working properly. And that is never more obvious than on questions which we might group under the broad heading of immigration. Because you cannot triangulate on immigration because for most parties of the right, declared parties of the right, there is no limit to how far they will move to the right. There is no limit to how far they will chase the issue to the bottom in a bid to secure public support. It took a relatively short time before we would be, after the first boats were reported, before we were being assured by Philip Ruddock, the Hannibal Lecter of Australian politics, that these people could not possibly have genuine asylum claims because the conflict in Sri Lanka was over. It took a relatively short time before we were being assured by no less an authority than Wilson Tuckey that these people must be terrorists and so therefore they shouldn't be allowed in. Now, the facts are to this debate in Australian politics as kryptonite is to Superman. Okay? Just to review one or two of them, first of all, this canard that asylum seekers must be terrorists has been in circulation at least since the 9/11 attacks, where this was deliberately, those flames were deliberately and calculatedly fanned into life by John Howard as one of his infamous wedge issues. Actually, the record shows that in response to that, ASIO, the security service, and these people who are actually concerned with the facts rather than seeking political advantage, were tasked with the job of routinely screening asylum seekers for any possible terrorist connections. Now, what percentage of those people do you suppose actually rang any alarm bells with ASIO in any sustainable sense? How many did turn out to be legitimate terrorist suspects? Oh, let's have a guess. Perhaps 20%? No. 10%? No. 5%? No, actually none. Actually none. So the facts are completely at odds with that particular claim. We are witnessing it in the media, and Chris will know that one of my hobby horses is the extent to which the media form a kind of echo chamber for these calculated political formulations. We're being treated to the usual array of inundation metaphors. Inundation metaphors. We are faced with a flood of asylum seekers who will be trickling in as if to undermine the very kind of structure of our society. Actually, in the whole of 2008, approximately 850,000 asylum claims were made in the world. About 850,000. So what percentage do we suppose were lodged in Australia? Let's see now. 50%? 25%? 10%? 5%? Actually about 2%. Okay? Only about 4,500 asylum claims were made in Australia of all those. By comparison, France received 35,000 claims, the United States 49,000 claims. Big, wealthy countries, they can take it, right? Okay, well, the record last year was held by another country which received over 200,000 claims, namely South Africa. So a middle-income country received approximately 50 times the number of asylum claims that Australia did. Now, as a Brit, let me tell you, you inhabit a conspicuously, even outlandishly, large, wealthy country with virtually no people in it. Okay, so Australia can afford to do its bit, and when it's faced with a few boats bobbing around in the seas off its shores, you need to calm down. Okay, it's not that bad. So that's that one. Let's attend to the apparent pusillanimity of the Rudd government in actually following through on issues of human rights and humanitarian protection. A few weeks ago, there was a rather upbeat statement released by Foreign Minister Stephen Smith and Attorney General Robert McClelland, welcoming the addition and adoption of a new additional protocol to the